What's up, jet ski fans? Welcome to another Joel Arsenault YouTube video. Thanks for hanging out with me here. I do appreciate it. In today's video, we are going to take a close look at my triple swapped X2 and see what kind of damage is sustained from my trip to the JetSki brothers. As most of you will know, I had an engine failure while I was there, as well as some broken wires. And while you might think I was quite upset about this, I think it was to be expected. I was running this custom made or DIY cylinder head, however you want to say that, and it only failed once I started running 87 octane. If I was running 104 low lead or 114 race gas and the same thing happened, I would be a little bit more upset about it, but I think it was pretty understandable why it broke. The X2 also worked better than it ever has, and it was torture tested over a period of a few days, a lot of wide open throttle runs, and some pretty hard use. So all in all, it held up really well, and I'm also impressed at how well the electronics held up and everything else held up against the salt water. So what we're gonna do here is, before we even tear into the engine, I'm going to take a look over some of the components, take a look at, it's been sitting for a few weeks now. We're going to take a close look and see what kind of damage, if anything, we've sustained from the salt water. See if everything kind of still moves and works on it, see if we've got any corrosion, and then we'll pop the engine out and take a closer look at it. Remember, we do have to rebuild the crankshaft, so this was going to have to happen anyway. After taking a really quick look at this, I can already tell you that this is miles better than it was after my first visit to the JetSki brothers. You can see there's a little bit of corrosion on the bolts that hold on the fuel fill cap or whatever you call that. That rust was there before, and other than that, I don't really see any corrosion. There's no corrosion on the carburetors. There is a little bit of salt residue where I removed the head. But other than that, I don't see anything nasty. Surprisingly, pretty much the same story over here. A tiny little bit of rust inside of this bolt. And maybe a little bit inside this bolt, but all the rest of them look perfectly fine. I'm kind of lost for words. I totally expected to see a lot more carnage than this. That salt water is nasty stuff. A little bit of salt residue around this connection on my trim setup, but it is still functioning. I'm guessing that the bilge switch... Oh, okay, well, it's a little flaky, but... it's working, but it's got a bit of a flaky connection, and I don't think you can actually pull that apart and clean it, so I should probably get a new one of those because I can't really trust it anymore. Those of you who have been following my journey will know that I've had a struggle with lithium-ion batteries. I've actually gone through 2 of them, and I have my 3rd one in here. I've tried a little bit different of a setup, and we're gonna pop the lid off now and see if what I did actually worked. I haven't had this lid off since the spring, since I installed the battery, and so I'm kind of scared of what we're going to find inside there, but we might as well do it now before the ski sits all winter and we get more nasty corrosion, if corrosion is happening. You can see on top of this connector we do have a little bit of green death happening, but that doesn't really mean anything. This lid is mostly sealed. So I'm going to remove these connections and then we're gonna pop this lid open. I hope to make a better lid for this that is better sealed and looks a little bit nicer. This was supposed to be a temporary solution, but as with many temporary solutions, other more important things come along, like actually riding the ski. And so yeah, this is still on there. So let's pull these bolts off and then I'll open this up and we can get a look at the battery. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm getting some tools. Okay, there's some moisture in there. and I can see there was a little opening here. I'm glad I'm opening it, because it would have never dried. Oh, there's a big opening here. A big spot here that wasn't completely sealed. I'm gonna pop off these connectors and clean up around there as well. I've rinsed it off with fresh water and then wiped it down with a paper towel, but I would like to get in around these guys. You can see there's some of that green death forming in there. I really want to get that stuff gone. All in all, I'm pretty pleased with the way this held up. It was a temporary solution, and I knew I was going to have to change it all along. The battery didn't get damaged. It is over there on the shelf, almost completely charged already, so that means that it wasn't extremely depleted. We are going to have to come up with a better, more permanent solution for the battery, but we also knew that all along. This lasted for the summer. It got me riding, and so it served its purpose. Next up is the electronics, which also held up fairly well. I did have a couple of broken ground wires that caused some issues, but the enclosure itself, or my carbon fiber e-box, held up. I'm now going to pull the surf brace off and the e-box. We will maybe take a look inside and see what's going on in there, see if we have any moisture or anything like that. I suspect that it stayed sealed up pretty well, but I guess it won't hurt to look in there, so we should do that. This is the battery charge wire. Nice and clean inside there, no corrosion. And then this connector, which comes from the stator. Again, no water, no corrosion. I'm very pleased about that. A little bit of corrosion on these zinc plated connectors, retainers on the bottom side of the e-box. Not much you can do about that. I guess I could make different ones out of another material or powder coat them maybe, but that kind of doesn't matter except that it looks crappy. What I'm first going to do is remove the inspection cover, or the programming port on the bottom, and see if there is any sign of moisture. And it looks perfectly dry in here, which is what I expected. I don't see any moisture or feel any sweating whatsoever, so I am confident that that stayed completely dry inside there. For those of you who haven't been following along or don't remember, I used Permatex The Right Stuff to seal around the lid, and the only opening is on the bottom, and it was plugged with some of that same, what do you call it, tacky tape. So sealed up quite well and on the bottom side, so almost impossible for water to get up in there. Some of you who have been following the build may remember that I had a bunch of throttle problems early on. I ended up breaking, I think, 3 throttle cables. I was trying to make my own, and I was dealing with issues with corrosion and all sorts of other things. I now have a stainless steel bicycle brake cable on there that I soldered on a new end for, and as you guys can see, it is working perfectly fine. For the next little bit, what I'm going to be doing is removing the fuel tank, carburetors, exhaust, and then pulling the engine. This should go pretty quick. I will put up on the screen how long this actually took me. I'm gonna grab some gloves and then we'll go. Jacob gave me a set of old SBN carburetors and a manifold that he modified and a jig that he made with the intention of me welding everything together and making a very low profile intake manifold so that I can run some sort of inlet protection. I've been running my intake completely open for a couple of years now, and I don't know that I've had any direct engine failures because of it, but it definitely hasn't done my engine any good. I often do silly things that I would not recommend anyone else do, but do as I say and not as I do, as they say. I do a lot of silly things and just accept that things are probably going to fail and I'll just have to repair them when they break. But some things like running your inlet open and just accepting that you're going to suck in a bunch of water, not the best idea. When I was visiting the JetSki brothers, we were able to see that there was some damage to the piston. What we were not able to see is that there's actually a window right down into the bottom of the case. So I will use my iPhone to try to show you guys this. I can actually see light through the piston. Oh boy, so that's where all the compression went. Not just because of the erosion there. Very cool. I was momentarily worried about the crankshaft and the connecting rod, and then I remembered we're building the crankshaft anyway. It was going to get rebuilt even if the engine didn't blow up. Let's pop the stator cover off real quick and see how that stood up to the salt water. Oh no! Look at that grossness. Oh no! Oh my goodness, that is nasty. After removing the starter motor, just out of habit, I tried to rotate it with my fingers and it moves a little bit, but it seems locked up. Oh yeah, that is not ideal. That's not a good situation. My starter motor is leaking. No corrosion on the reed valves. I suppose I should inspect them as we pull them out. No broken reeds. No corrosion. The reeds look good. Wow. Wow, folks. That is really something. Man, that's nasty in there, folks. That's all kinds of nasty. Yeah, there is a hole through my piston. Wow, it's almost caved in. It was getting really hot there, folks. Really hot. Yeah, it sure is retaining a lot of oil, and that's a good thing. Let's see how noisy bearing number 1 is. Not much worse than it was before. It does have quite a bit of oil in it, but bearing number 2, again, a little bit noisy. These bearings would have been exposed to some aluminum from that piston blowing up. And of course the labyrinth seal. That bearing is quite noisy. Bearing number 3. Bearing number 4. Meh. Bearing number 5. And the last one. Meh. Not great, but I've definitely heard worse. Now that I have the cylinders removed, I can see there are some chattering marks where the piston ring was catching on the exhaust port. So what we're gonna have to do is clean up this aluminum off of the cylinder, which is cleaning up as I'm talking about it. That's pretty easy. Now what we're gonna have to do is run the hone through this. I'm gonna run the rigid hone through and see if, see if we are left with a cylinder that will work or not. There are some pretty substantial chatter marks. The camera won't be able to pick this up for sure. Oh, well, those marks are disappearing pretty quickly, so I am pleased with that. I was almost certain I was going to have to re-sleeve this cylinder. I was fairly certain that I was going to have to tell you guys that this cylinder would have to be re-sleeved, so I am happy to inform you that all I need to do is get a new piston kit for this, and as far as this part of it goes, we will be good to go. Of course, I still do need to rebuild the crank. I'm not going to start pulling the crank apart until I've got a few things figured out. On this particular Kawasaki crankshaft, the pin is actually part of the web on this web, I believe this web, and this web. So if you look at the end of the crankshaft here, hopefully you can see the pin and the web are two separate components. So the web actually gets pushed onto the pin. However, if we spin this around enough so that you can see the back side of where the pin would come through here, it's just all one piece. So the big end pin is part of the web. The rod kits come with a separate pin, so you need to be able to press it in. This pin will be damaged from corrosion, so it's not an option to just reuse this web as is. The other option is to send this to a machine shop and have them bore that out, but that needs to be done very accurately. I have considered trying it myself because the piece is not usable as is, so why not give it a go? You can buy new webs, but they are $100 a piece American, I believe, so that the cost of that would be $300 US plus shipping just for those extra pieces, and already there's a substantial amount invested into this, and at some point it just doesn't make sense to rebuild the crank anymore and makes more sense to have either somebody else do it or buy a new crank. I'm not sure how you guys view this, but I think this was a pretty successful season of testing and tuning. I had no plans at the first of the year to build my own cylinder head and do testing and tuning on that, but that's just what happened. When I say building my own cylinder head, of course, I mean using an OEM head, machining it out as a cap, water jacket, and then machining out on a manual lathe and a manual mill my very own domes, and building a tool to actually do this on my lathe. If you guys know of another YouTube channel that's doing this, I mean, other than two-stroke stuffing and, what is it, Ladan? Let me know about it in the comment section, but yeah, I'm pretty impressed with myself, and I am really happy with the results. We did get this to fail, but keep in mind that, you know, cylinder heads made by ADA and the OEM heads, and yeah, all sorts of engines blow up, especially when you start doing weird tuning things. And so the fact that this blew up on 87 octane and ran fine on 94, I am perfectly pleased with that. The X2 is going to take a whole bunch of work. I'm not sure when I'm going to get around to it, I quite foolishly had hoped that I was going to be able to get my CNC milling machine up and running fairly quickly, and then I would be able to machine out the webs so that I could build my crankshaft. So the OEM webs need to be bored out very precisely so that I can push the crank back together and they won't be wobbly all over the place. I could send them away to have them done. I was hoping to do it myself. I might just try doing it on my manual mill, but I think it has too much flex on it. And yeah, I don't think I have tools that are precise enough to do it on that mill. So it may still be something that I wait to do on my manual mill. I do have some webs, a crankshaft just sitting off camera here. I believe it was the original crank that the JetSki brothers sent me. It was a SBT crank that was welded together, and I can push it together. I tested some of the clearance, and there's SBT, when they welded it together, they did some pretty shady stuff, and maybe in an OEM engine, but where I'm planning on making a little bit more power with this, I don't really feel comfortable using that crank. So yeah, yet to be determined as to when I'm going to get to do that and how it's going to be done. But I will be building a crank at some point for this in the future. And so yeah, stay tuned for that. Once I get my CNC milling machine up and running, I plan on making a whole bunch of parts for my X2 as well as other skis and just random bits and pieces. I've been quite busy over on my Lowered Expectations channel making videos. Viver's having a Black Friday sale, and I got involved in promoting that for them. Last week, BJ and I spent a bunch of time installing a diesel heater on his Toyota 4Runner, and we're building a spare tire carrier for the back of it to mount the fuel tank. If that sounds like something you might be interested in, or if you just want to be nice and support me, head on over there and check that out. Link, of course, in the description below. Also, a link to my Patreon account as well as my Teespring. I believe that's all I have to say for now. All of the shameless plugging is done. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.